The purpose of today's video is to review the pre-constructed deck called Growing Threat. By the end of this video, you're going to learn how this deck plays, how you may want to upgrade this deck, and what you can expect monetarily, like how much money are you making by investing in the cards in this deck. Always keep in mind, these videos are made for people who are literally brand new to Magic the Gathering. So if you have tons of Magic experience, there may be nothing that you would learn here, and you may act totally differently to what I would say. So when we take a look at this commander deck, mind you, this is the first time I'm looking at this commander deck. First thing we always look at is the price of the deck. This deck costs $62.11. I will say that that is quite a low value. We're talking about the other commander decks that we've reviewed already were above 150 or at least above 140. And this one being at 62 is definitely the lowest amount of value you're gonna get. And also keep in mind that as this deck releases, this price is gonna drop even more. These decks cost about $40. Generally, the decks that tend to sell the worst, they generally tend to be decks where you're spending more money than what the deck is actually worth, which I think right now this deck is very dangerously close to finding that area where you're spending $40 in a deck that is actually more expensive than you just building out the deck yourself on a website somewhere, and it's not a good start. The commander for this commander deck is Brimaz, Blight of Oreskos. I'll tell you the art automatically. The art for this card is amazing. It says, whenever you cast a Phyrexian creature or artifact creature spell, incubate X, where X is the spell's mana value. Incubate means that whenever you cast a Phyrexian artifact, you're going to create a token with X +1/+1 counters on it, equal to the amount of value that the spell costs. So if I spend 5 mana on an artifact spell, I create an incubate token with 5 +1/+1 counters. It's kind of like fractals. This token also has the ability to pay 2 to transform the artifact, and it becomes a Phyrexian artifact creature. So it'll turn into a creature with the amount of counters that you have on it. At the beginning of each end step, if a Phyrexian creature died under your control this turn, you proliferate. Essentially allows you to increase the counters of whatever kind of counters you would like. Because this is a Phyrexian cat, I would be interested to see if there's an infect or poison counters inside this deck. Being able to proliferate every single turn, you know, if I get like 1 or 2 points of infect on somebody and I'm able to proliferate 1, 2, 3, 4 times by my second go around than one person having an infect counter or a poison counter, I could essentially have them at, 5 infect. 2 complete turns around the table could get someone to 10 poison counters and they would lose the game. So I don't know if that's how this deck works, but we're gonna find out. So the first card that we're gonna avoid talking about these plains cards over here just to keep it as simple as possible for the new players. We have a Blade Splicer. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you create a 3/3 colorless golem artifact creature token. I don't know if this is really, the tokens you're creating with your commander they're not golems. So this just seems like a card that's inside the deck because it looks like a Phyrexian, and that's pretty much it. Last time I checked, when I look at this over here, there's nothing that says golems over there. So yeah, take this card out of the deck. Bloodline Pretender. Enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Whenever another creature of the chosen type enters the battlefield under your control, put a counter on the Bloodline Pretender. Okay. I mean, I'm assuming you're going to be choosing Phyrexian, and depending on the number of Phyrexians, there are 32 creatures inside this deck, so this could turn into a big creature. I would just take this out of the deck though. Phyrexian Minion Bone Shredder. Echo. Means that you have to sacrifice it if you don't pay that cost during your next turn. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target non-artifact, non-black creature. All right, Burnished Heart. This is a classic. This is a good card. You pay 3, then your next turn you pay 3, and then you get to sacrifice the Burnished Heart and search for 2 basic land cards. Let's go. Always a good card. Completed Huntmaster. You can tap this and pay 1 to sacrifice another creature or artifact, and then you incubate 3. So you create a token with 3 +1/+1 counters on it. I mean, you need to sacrifice things inside this deck to trigger the proliferation with your commander. So I think that works pretty well. I would keep that. Keskit, the Flesh Sculptor. Sacrifice 3 other artifacts and/or creatures. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put 2 of them into your hand and the other into your graveyard. Yeah, I mean, it's card advantage. It's going to help you to sacrifice things, which is what the deck wants to do. And at the same time, you're going to look at cards in your library. Not bad. Phyrexian Ghoul, it's a sacrifice outlet. You know, card is kind of meh. I would take this out. Phyrexian Rager enters the battlefield. You draw a card and you lose 1 life. I would keep that. Whenever Scrap Trawler or another artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, return to your hand target artifact card in your graveyard with lesser mana value. Scrap Trawler mostly works in infinite combos, so you'll essentially sacrifice something to have something go to the graveyard to then have Scrap Trawler trigger to then get that thing back, for you to sacrifice something to get something from your graveyard back, and it just kind of creates this infinite loop going back and forth. I don't know if that exists inside this Precon. I'm gonna do my best to see if it does, but it's a good card. You keep that card inside the deck. Shimmermere says you may cast artifact spells as though they had flash. Maybe there's creatures that are artifact, yeah, like this, so that you can cast those creatures with flash, but I don't know. Shimmermere is good when it's good, and it's rarely that I find the Shimmermere is really impactful when I play personally. You could have different experience, but this is a maybe. Is your commander artifact? Yeah, I mean, if my commander was an artifact, I think it would be a little bit different. Filigree Vector. When Filigree Vector enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each of any number of target creatures and a charge counter on each and any number of target artifacts. Charge counter, guys. That's the secret to this entire deck right there. It's the charge counters. Guys, this deck is a Darksteel Reactor commander deck. Darksteel Reactor essentially says once this artifact has 10 counters on it, you win the game. Okay, so that just changes completely how I'm looking at the deck right now. So let's look at this again. You can pay 1 tap to sacrifice another artifact and you proliferate. Guys, this is a Darksteel Reactor commander deck, which I think is actually pretty cool. I'm telling you right now, if you're buying this commander deck, you have to buy, if this card is not already inside this deck, which I doubt it, you have to buy this card in order to make this deck have value. I think that Darksteel Reactor is the entire point of this commander deck. You just want to be able to consistently get that sacrifice trigger off so that you can proliferate, and that's making me rethink the Phyrexian Ghoul over here. I would keep this just because it creates a token and lets you sacrifice that token, and if you're playing around that Darksteel Reactor to win, needing 20 counters to win the game, you know, all that proliferation is going to help. So when Graveshifter enters the battlefield, you may return target creature card from graveyard to your hand. Technically, this is a Phyrexian, so it's going to create a token with 4 +1/+1 counters. You know, I would play it. I would keep it. Master Splicer, create a 3/3 colorless golem artifact. I would take this card out of the deck. Vulpine Harvester. Whenever one or more Phyrexians you control attack, return target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield if its mana value is less than or equal to their total power. This is a good card, guys. This is a real card. This card is ever only going to be played inside this commander deck, but you know, there's value to be had there. It's a decent card. I like it. Cataclysmic Gearhulk enters the battlefield. Each player chooses an artifact, creature, an enchantment, and a planeswalker, and then sacrifices the rest. This is a good repeatable board wipe where you can continuously play this over and over again and just keep everybody from having a board. Moira from Overwatch and Tashar. Whenever you cast a historic spell, return target non-land permanent from your graveyard to the battlefield. Okay. It gains haste. Exile it at the beginning of the next end step. If it would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. Yeah, I mean, it's gonna get something from your graveyard back to the battlefield. I'm not too sure what, you know, I'm seeing a lot of really highly expensive creatures over there, so that might be why it's worth playing, but it's a decent card. I'm not gonna say it's the worst, but I would rather play this in a deck where my graveyard is just getting filled very easily so that I could take advantage of that ability. Just decks where I'm just putting cards straight into my graveyard, you know. Phyrexian Delver would also help with that. You can cast this and you return a creature from your graveyard back to the battlefield. You do lose life equal to its mana value, but it's a good card. I would play that. Psychosis Crawler, you draw a card, each opponent is going to lose 1 life, and his power and toughness is equal to the number of cards in your hand. I don't think we're going to be drawing that many cards inside this deck, at least it doesn't seem like it. So I would probably take this card out of the deck, even though it's a good card. It's just good to have in your collection, honestly. Shattered Angel. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, you may gain 3 life. It's a decent card. You know, this is a card that people have to remove just so you don't end up gaining a lot of life. If you can get this down onto the board early, it's a good way to force removal out of your opponent's hands. Blight Titan. Oh, this card's awesome. Death Touch. Whenever Blight Titan enters the battlefield or attacks, mill 2 cards. See, that's the mill that I was just referencing. Then Incubate X, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a pretty decent card right there. I'm not gonna lie. It's a pretty cool card. It has Death Touch, so people are generally not going to want to block it, but it is a 6/6, so it's like it's going to be swinging in pretty comfortably. It's a decent card. I don't think it's amazing, but it's a Phyrexian, you know, accomplishes. It's going to create a 6/6 token by itself, so essentially you're paying 6 mana to put 12 power onto the board. Not even. You're paying 6 mana to put 12 power on the board with your commander, and then as this enters the battlefield, you create another token. So we're talking about like at minimum 13 power on the board when you cast for 6 mana. Guys, that's pretty good. You do have to spend mana to turn those incubate tokens into creatures, but the potential's there, you know. This deck is sneaky. It's interesting. Like, the cards over here are not too good, but like I have to have patience for it because I don't know what it's gonna play like. We have a Duplicant. Yeah, this is a great card. Exiles a creature. You just play this, exile something. Duplicant becomes a copy of whatever you exiled, or it gains its power and toughness, I should say. Duplicant, good card. Keep that. First Sphere Gargantua enters the battlefield. You're going to draw a card and lose 1 life. It does have Unearth, so you can do that again. Listen, for 6 mana, I would take this card out of the deck. It's just way too much mana, and it's not even a Phyrexian. We have Massacre Worm. When this enters the battlefield, creatures your opponent's control get -2/-2 until the end of turn. Whatever creature your opponent controls dies, that player loses 2 life. You know, it's a good way to just wipe the board. It does seem kind of, you know, but it is a Phyrexian, so when this enters the battlefield, you are going to get an Incubate token with 6 counters on it. So remember, we're talking about paying 6 mana and essentially putting double the power on the board, because Massacre Worm is 6 power, and then you get a 6/6 that you can create for 2 mana. I think this deck is low-key good, guys. I think it's low, like, we haven't played Incubate tokens, and I can't sit here and say what it's going to feel like when I'm sitting down playing that, but if I played this Massacre Worm and I have 2 mana left over, to me it seems kind of oppressive for me to pay 6 mana and then have 12 power on the board, guys. I feel like people potentially maybe underestimating how kind of nuts that sounds. Like, that's a lot of power on the board out of nowhere. Noxious Gearhulk. When he enters the battlefield, you may destroy another target creature. If a creature is destroyed this way, you gain life equal to its toughness. Yeah, I mean, that's always a good card. Enter the battlefield, destroy something, gain life. Menace. It's great. It's a good card. Phyrexian Gargantua. When it enters the battlefield, you draw 2 cards and you lose 2 life. It's a horror. There's not Phyrexian inside its creature typing, so I just don't think that you would play this. Soul of New Phyrexia. 6 mana trample. You can pay 5 to give your permanents indestructible until the end of turn. You know, this is essentially 11 mana to play this and then to activate its ability. You know, I've seen this card many times and it's never really worked for me inside of an actual game. So I would just probably take this card out of the deck. Even though I think it's a decent card, it's a good card, I think that there might be better cards to play. Angel of the Ruins, like this. This is impactful. Flying, Angel of the Ruins enters the battlefield, exile up to 2 target artifacts or enchantments. So you get a creature, you exile 2 artifacts or enchantments, and you could plane cycle this to go search for a land. It's a good card. Darksteel Splicer. Whenever Darksteel Splicer or another non-token Phyrexian enters the battlefield under your control, create X/3/3 colorless Phyrexian Golem artifact creature tokens, where X is the number of opponents you have. Golems you control have indestructible. For 7 mana, yeah, I mean, here's a deck building tip, at least what I was taught. If you're putting a card inside your commander deck and you need it to function with all of the other cards inside your deck, if you put 3 cards in your commander deck and you're like, oh, this card is inside this deck because this 1 or this 2 cards over here combo well with it. When you do that, you have, out of the 99 cards inside your deck, you have 3 that basically need each other. Those cards tend to work poorly. I would just take those cards out of the deck and put them in a different commander deck. Because Darksteel Splicer, you had the Blade Splicer, and then there was another Splicer over here somewhere. Those cards essentially just, they all function with one another, and they're not necessarily functioning with the rest of the deck. So I would just say take all those cards out of the deck and put them in a deck where you're taking creatures and having them leave the battlefield and enter the battlefield, and that's where you can take advantage of their enter the battlefield trigger. I just think that it's not good inside this deck. So maybe we can, that's a trap, guys. Be free from acting that way when you're building commander decks. Take this card out of the deck. Even though it's a good card, just take it out. Meteor Golem, yeah, it's going to enter the battlefield. You're going to destroy something. Mere Battlesphere is a lot of words. Enters the battlefield, create 4 1/1 artifact creature tokens. Whenever Mere Battlesphere attacks, we just got a subscriber real time while I'm recording this video. Thank you for subscribing, Turks. I appreciate that. Whenever Mere Battlesphere attacks, you may tap X, untap Mere you control. If you do, Mere Battlesphere gets +X/+0 until the end of turn and deal X damage to the player or planeswalker it's attacking. I feel like whenever they're playing artifact commander decks, Wizards of the Coast just puts Mere Battlesphere inside the deck every single time. It doesn't matter whether it's beneficial or not. Mere Battlesphere is just it's a board state on 1 card. It's 7 mana. You're gonna create 4 1/1s. You can tap the 1/1s to buff the Mere Battlesphere. And mind you, with your commander in play, you're gonna play Mere Battlesphere and you're gonna get a 7/7 token, essentially, 2 mana, which is pretty good. Phyrexian Triniform. When Phyrexian Triniform dies, create 3 Phyrexian Golem artifact creature tokens. It is a 9 mana creature that you can encore, which would just be amazing. Encore says pay 12, exile this card from your graveyard. For each opponent, create a token copy that attacks an opponent this turn. If able, they gain haste. Sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. So essentially, you pay 12 mana, and if you have 3 opponents, 3 times 3, you're gonna have 9 3/3s at the end of that turn, which would be amazing. I think if people think this commander deck is bad, I can't say whether it's bad or whether it's good right now because I don't know how oppressed. To me, I'll tell you right now, to me, that sounds oppressive. For me to pay mana and get double the power seems really annoying, which is the reason why the incubate tokens cost 2 mana to turn into a creature to balance it. Because I think that what we have here is something that's low key, incredibly strong, guys. We just, with our commander in play, we're doubling the amount of power we have on the board, guys. This deck is low key oppressive. We have Swords to Plowshares, good. Exile a creature for 1 mana. Despark is going to exile a creature for 1 mana. Go for the throat. 2 mana, destroy target non-artifact creature. Knight's Whisper, you draw 2 cards, lose 2 life. Good. Excise the Imperfect. Okay, 3 mana, exile target non-land permanent. Dude, we just got another subscriber, Tiago Rocha. Thank you for subscribing. Exile target non-land permanent. Its controller incubates X, where X is its mana value. I mean, you got to exile a non-land permanent. They are going to create a token out of it that could turn into a creature. I mean, it's a cool card. It's exiling, instant speed. You know, it's all right. Could be better. Mortify. Victimize is going to get a creature from your graveyard onto the battlefield. 2 creatures from your graveyard onto the battlefield tapped. Always a good card. I remember this card used to be like $4. Ambition's Cost. Utter End. Exile target non-land permanent. Cool. Path of the Schemer. Each player mills 2 cards, then you put a creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Specifically says from a graveyard. Dude, how many subscribers are we getting right now, guys? Oh, starting with you, each player chooses Planeswalk or Chaos. If Planeswalk gets more votes, Planeswalk. If Chaos, yeah, these have to do with the Planes cards over here off to the side that we're not going over. Yawgmoth's Vile Offering. You can put 1 target creature or Planeswalker from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control, and then you get to destroy 1 target creature or planeswalker. So guys, generally, you know, reanimation spells at their cheapest cost 4 or 5. So to be able to destroy a creature while you're doing that seems just like a nice added bonus. You do have to have a legendary creature in play in order for this to go off. So your commander has to be on the battlefild. Phyrexian Rebirth, destroy all creatures, then you create an XX token, where X is the number of creatures destroyed this way. It's a cool card, very flavorful. Soul Ring, you keep that, it's good. Wayfarer's Bauble, fantastic. Arcane Signet, fantastic. Look at this, 1 mana to play, 2 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 mana to play. What is this? Bitterthorn, Nissa's Animus, 3 mana, living weapon, which means this enters the battlefield as a creature that is equipped with this actual equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1. Whenever equipped creature attacks, you may search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Dude, yes, that's an amazing card right there. Okay, that's a cool card. This is the best card inside the deck, guys. That's the best card. It's pretty decent. It doesn't have a price. This card right here, if this card had a price, would increase this price by, I'm gonna say, at least $5. At least $5. This is a pretty decent card right here. I like this. Commander Sphere, Nettle Cyst. Each creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact and or enchantment you control. Guys, this card basically says GG. The amount of power your creatures are gonna gain from this one card is substantial. Orzhov Locket. Okay, Sculpting Steel is going to enter the battlefield as a copy of a target artifact. Cool. Hedron Archive. Guys, you need a lot of mana rocks like this. The Hedron Archive costs 4 mana, but you can tap it for 2. Find as many artifacts as you can for 4 mana or 3 mana that tap for 2 mana, just so that you can activate your incubate creature tokens. Ichor Elixir, here's another one. Tap to create 2 mana. It's just basically like activate your incubate creature. We have Scythe Claw. Equipped creature gets +1/+1, enters the battlefield as a creature, and then whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses half their life rounded up. Seems kind of random. I would probably take this card out of the deck. Coveted Jewel. This really seems random. Enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards. You can tap it to add 3 mana. And then whenever one or more creatures an opponent controls attacks you and aren't blocked, that player draws 3 cards and gains control of the Coveted Jewel. It just seems like they wanted to reprint this card. We have Phyrexian Scriptures. It's a cool board wipe. You can put a counter of up to 1 target creature and that becomes an artifact. Listen, generally all your creatures are going to be artifacts, and under the phase 2 of this enchantment, it says destroy all non-artifact creatures. So it's a one-sided board wipe essentially, which could definitely, this card right here is low-key one of the best cards inside the deck. This card by itself will win a lot of new players a lot of games. If you have this card in your hand and you're a new player, when you're playing this deck, hold it, play at the right time, and then just end the game. You should essentially have a ton of power on the board. It's this, destroy all of your opponent's creatures, and then attack on that same turn and just hit somebody for like 30 damage and knock them out. At least one player, knock one player out of the game. And then we have the lands. Any notable lands over here is Karn's Bastion. You can pay 4 mana to proliferate. Karn's Bastion's a pretty decent value. We also have this Fetid Heath here, which is kind of rare, which is a pretty decent way to fix your mana, and Bajuka Bog. Other than that, we have the Vault of the Archangel here, which is going to give your creatures Death Touch and Lifelink, which could have a huge swing on the way the game plays. Very powerful land right here at times. So that's the Growing Threat Precon. Listen, I don't know what to say about this deck. This is a Darksteel Reactor deck, like I said earlier. The way this deck looks and the way you're doubling, essentially a lot of doubling the power sometimes when you're playing your creatures, I think that this deck has the potential to be incredibly powerful, if I'm being honest. I've never played with incubate tokens, so it's difficult for me as someone that's played as much as I've played this game. It's difficult for me to sit here and say whether it's going to be weak or whether it's going to be strong. To me, in my brain, it sounds oppressive in my brain. Like, oh, I'm going to pay 6 mana, get a 6/6, and then I get a creature with 6 power over here off to the side. I do have to pay 2 mana to turn into a creature, but just the threat of that is gonna put your opponents in a position where they're not gonna want to attack into you because you're just gonna pay 2 mana to put 6 power on the board out of nowhere and to defend their life total. And then on your turn, you could essentially just go ahead and tap 2 to turn into a creature and start attacking people. And then you could hold up that 2 mana after you played another creature to then get another 5/5 or 6/6 creature to then turn into a creature. And it just kind of creates this situation where your opponents are just getting bigger. You're just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and everybody's just kind of sitting there like, wow, he's he just spent 6 mana and he's getting double the value for the amount of mana he's playing. And on top of that, you can sacrifice those tokens to make those creatures even bigger than that. I think that you're going to need ways to generate a lot of mana inside this commander deck to be able to pull that off, which is one thing that, you know, there's a decent amount of ways to ramp inside the deck with all the artifacts and the Burnished Heart over here. If I had to give this a review score, I would give this a 7 out of 10. I would say that this deck is, for brand new players to the game, it's simple, man. You're just playing creatures, have a commander in play, and put big creatures in play, and then just attack. Just make sure that you have mana left over to activate the incubate tokens as you play them. So that, in other words, if I have a 6 mana creature in my hand and my commander in play, and all I have is 6 mana, right? I can pay that mana, I can create my creature, but then I don't have any mana left over to activate the incubate token. What I would suggest you do is wait until you have 8 mana to cast that 6 mana creature. So when you create that incubate token, you have the 2 mana left over to be able to create or turn that incubate token into a creature. So essentially, this is, in other words, just turning your creatures and look at their mana value and add it by 2. And then that's going to decide whether you want to play that card or not. Just so that you always have the threat of turning the token that you create into a creature. Because I think that one really easy way to lose the value of this deck is to play creatures and to not be able to do anything with the tokens that you create. So just keep that in mind. And if you can find cards that help to reduce the mana value of the artifacts that you cast, those would probably work pretty well inside this deck too, just because there's a lot of artifacts inside this deck and you end up cheating a lot of mana by doing that. And more importantly, saving mana, you know, use that mana to create the incubation tokens. And also keep in mind, like, there's a card called, we're sacrificing things, right? There's a card called Black Market that essentially creates black mana whenever a creature is destroyed or you sacrifice a creature, something like that. There's also a card called Horizon Stone that, as steps and phases ends, if you have any leftover mana, it will store that mana. So if you can use both of those cards inside this commander deck, you could essentially sacrifice things to proliferate, to then generate mana, to then hold on to the mana with the Horizon Stone, to then use that mana just to save in general, to then activate the incubation tokens to turn them into creatures, to then attack or block. And it just sounds like a really oppressive combo. I would immediately add both of those cards into this commander deck, just so that you have a consistent amount of mana to activate your incubate tokens. I think it would work out pretty well. Phenomenal. Like, it's just the idea of that sounds super fun. I'm definitely gonna buy this commander deck. I think that, you know, we looked at the price over here, 62.11. You know, I think that this may scare some players from buying this deck just because it is on the lower end of the value. But I think as a deck that sits there and plays, I think this deck is low-key oppressive. That's my ruling. 7 out of 10, which could easily turn to 8 out of 10 if the incubate tokens are as oppressive as I think they're going to be. Okay, so if you enjoyed this video, remember that you can subscribe to the channel. The next deck that we're going to be going over is the Divine Convocation commander deck, and if you want to see that review, you can go ahead and subscribe, because eventually that video is going to get uploaded. Okay, also keep in mind that we do giveaways on the channel. We had started a giveaway. We're giving away a commander on this channel whenever I find the opportunity to, and you can find that video. I'll link it somewhere over here, and you can see what commander we're giving away. All you need to do is type giveaway to enter the giveaway. And we also are doing auctions for commander decks, and we had built a Chulane commander deck on stream a couple of months ago. And what I'm going to be doing is auctioning off this commander deck onto eBay. And what I'm going to be doing is taking 75% of that auction and automatically donating it to Petco Love, which is a charity, a non-profit charity for dogs and cats, so that we can feed dogs and cats so that they can stay healthy before they find a place to live and just be happy as animals. So the other 25% of that auction I'm going to keep so that I can pay for shipping in case somebody who wins the auction is international. I can pay for that shipping, and then I'm going to use the rest of that money to get more cards to do more donations like this, essentially. So if you would like the opportunity to get this Chulane commander deck, or win this Chulane commander deck, I should say, the deck list is in the description below. At the end of all of these reviews, I'm going to do a deck tech for this as the sale or the auction goes on, and we can help to raise some money for some dogs and cats if you're a cat person. Okay, so also keep in mind that we do have the Discord as well. You can join the Discord and you can talk to me over there if you'd like, if you have any questions. If you're a new player, keep in mind that in the Discord we have tons of deck lists available from all the people in our community. There's almost over 140 people in our Discord, and then they all upload deck lists. So if you need any ideas for commander decks, there's a ton of resource and information over there, and people will help you build commander decks if you need help. So always remember, eat healthy, okay? Work out every single day, all right? And most importantly, you guys got to remember to believe in yourself.